Hi, everyone. This is Jaime Alejandro with the Arts Calling podcast, the place where I interview hardworking independent creatives in the literary, visual, and performing arts. One quick reminder, if you look at the episode description, I have weekly shoutouts, so be sure to check out those links. There's exciting projects from previous guests, new publications, podcasts, and other independent projects from previous guests and friends of the show. So take a look at those links, please. We have to support independent artists, so let's do the best we can and support each other. Thank you. Now, on to the main event. Today, I am delighted to be Arts Calling author M.J. Gomez. So let me tell you about our guest. M.J. Gomez is the author of Love Letters from a Burning Planet, available from Variant Literature 2023. His poems are featured in Surging Tide, The Dawn Review, Anti-Heroine Chic, The Selkie, and others. You can find him on Twitter at BlueJayVerses. What an excellent conversation we have in store today. This is a very gentle yet informative discussion about not only MJ's collection, but about faith and how it influences his life and work. It was a very honest and personal conversation. And in particular, I also love this moment in which he shared some thoughts about identity and defining home, and that resonated with me tremendously, so I hope you enjoy that. Again, the book is Love Letters from a Burning Planet, and it is now available from Variant Lit. Without further delay, let's give MJ a call. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Morning. Nice to meet you. Hello.
Hey, good to meet you, MJ. How are you?
Great. It's Jaime, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you. I'm so excited to get to chat today. So we're going to be talking about Love Letters from a Burning Planet, which is going to be available soon from Variant Literature. Now, before we get to the work itself, I just wanted to check in and see if we could talk a little bit about you first, and maybe I could get to know you in that way. Can I ask where you are at these days, and where's home?
Right. So I'm a Filipino poet. I'm based in Saudi Arabia. I was born in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And yeah, I mean, I'm a born Muslim as well, and I feel that a lot of that especially informs my work. And yeah, that's sort of it. I feel that a lot of my work mostly is influenced by faith and not necessarily by place. I've never really felt out of place here. There's no real false standards I've felt to that I had to live up to. But yeah, otherwise, I'm just here, and I'm me, and I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. So, if I may ask, has faith been a big part of your life always?
I would say so. Yeah, especially more in the past couple years. Saudi Arabia and, well, Muslim countries in general and Muslim society in general is, I would say, very God conscious. There's a lot of everyday phrases involving God. For example, the Muslim version, I would say, of bless you after someone sneezes is Alhamdulillah, which is all praise is to God. And it also means I'm doing good. So if someone asks you how you're doing, you'll say Alhamdulillah as well. And yeah, that part of being God conscious has definitely influenced my work to some degree. But in the past couple of years as well, I've started to reconnect to my religion. I feel as a born Muslim, there are a lot of things and aspects about the faith that I haven't necessarily had the time to delve into, more so just, I don't want to say blindly practicing, but it's definitely I suppose, an issue with a lot of born faiths, that you
Mm,
just grow up doing the
right.
practice and not really perhaps building a relationship with God. And a lot of that does come up in love letters as well.
Sure, and that's the reason I wanted to ask you about it because it is a wonderful work of devotion, and there is beautiful writing in Love Letters from a Burning Planet, but there is a clear central theme of worship and finding your place within that. And so, if I may ask, if we could get into Love Letters from a Burning Planet, how do you begin a collection like this? Because it is a poetry collection, and so I'm curious how it started for you, or when did you think you had the right poems for a collection?
Right. Well, first, I started taking poetry really seriously in late 2021. Um, so that was when I really started cultivating a writing practice. Then I spent pretty much all of 2022 just writing, studying, and yeah, I began to think of the idea of a chapbook pretty much again throughout all of 2022. But the time when I knew it was time was really again late 2022, I believe, in October or November, when I uh, essentially a lot of things went wrong at the same time, and then I was given that sort of subconscious drive to make something of all this, so to speak. And so I compiled a number of poems from that I had written in 2022, and then to tie it all together was the real challenge. So at that time, I essentially had maybe 7 poems, and then when I really started to work on the collection, I believe was the poem "All That Follows Is True." That poem is actually the fifth section of a very long poem that I had started writing in that mindset that is sort of the world is ending, and yeah, that sort of doomsday mindset. Um, and yeah, that initially was an 8-page long poem that was sort of the centerpiece of the collection. But then I thought, while I was uh, putting together the poems for the collection, I came up with the title "Love Letters from a Burning Planet," and I thought, well, I suppose it's time for a title poem, because that was really my first time seriously putting together any sort of extended collection. I'd written a lot of individual poems, but not really any long works, so to speak. So yeah, the real challenge was finding that connecting thread, and I began doing that with the title poem and also the end poem that comes after it, Obad. Um, so I spent, I'm not sure how much time, maybe a month or 2 months, um, putting together not necessarily the longest poems. I think it's only 3 pages. But the title poem was really when things started to gel. And then after that, after some consultation, especially with then editor in chief of Fifth Wheel Press, Nat Rom, whose work I just really love, they urged me to section the book because at the time, actually, um, when I started submitting the manuscript, it wasn't like it is now. It was only 10 poems, but I believe it was even longer because of the two back-to-back long poems at the end. So yeah, I at that time I had only written Study of Mud, and then after submitting, I had written the poem Study of Daylight, which was another poem on faith, and then at that time, I sort of looked at the manuscript again because I didn't think I was gonna get accepted right away. So I I was really ready to spend another year just working on this
Mm.
project.
Yeah. And it is a
Um,
testament to the
so
works because
yeah,
they are so direct but also very passionate. And one of the things that I appreciated now that you're mentioning it, yeah, the study of mud and study of daylight being the focal points in part 1 and 2, it's such a great way to start, right? And then you start getting into,
mm,
the other portions of the book. But if I may ask you about what is it that made the sections definitive for you, in terms of
right.
deciding which
Mm.
ones went in which section?
Sort of arbitrary. Not really, but
Went by feeling. You have
it's
to feel it
sort
out.
of yeah. It's like the first 10 poem manuscript. It's sort of had the same progression, beginning with study of mud, ending with Obad. I didn't change the poems around too much. There was still that element of a crescendo to the title poem and to Obad. Um, but what I did with what the separation allowed me was to add these, again, sort of arbitrary markers. The study poems aren't fully indicative of the subject of the of each section, but I believe they do segue into into the sort of first poem. Like Cuneiform and Angel are both the second poems in their sections, but I believe those are really the sort of thesis statement. So if we want to think of it as an essay, Study of Mud and Study of Daylight are perhaps the introductions, which both explore faith, but also a certain aspect of it that leads into the next poem, which is what the section is mainly about. So I like to think of the first section as, well, if we want to be a bit gauche, as the love letters section, and then the second section is about the burning planet. Um, to expand upon that, the first section is, as you may have noticed, a more romantic section, one that's more exploring yeah, exploring human want, human desire. I believe cuneiform even talks about the desire for fame and what we do for it. Then, yeah, the first section I would say is a more explicitly romantic section, but I believe there's still that sense of loss, which is either impending or something that has already happened, so to speak. I even think of Sahar by Tamino, which is a really great album, who says that the album is sort of set after a great tragedy has occurred. And so the album is just him picking up the pieces, so to speak. And that picks up in the second section, which is goes even more into loss, which is again going more again explicitly into that feeling and exploration of grief within multiple lenses, within the religious lens, within the lens of toxic masculinity, um, one even about the author's grief. That's Good Lord Green Apple. So, yeah, the second section is more of an exploration of
Right.
grief and its various sources.
Yeah.
The speaker isn't necessarily speaking to the same beloved, so to speak, but it all comes together, circling that main idea of grief.
Right. One of my favorite pieces here is Self-Portrait as Empty Mirror, which is a wonderful prelude to Love Letters from a Burning Planet, the main poem of the collection here. Could we talk about that one as an example here? Can you elaborate a little bit about the origin of that particular poem and maybe some hardships
Right.
experienced in writing that one?
Right. Yeah, this poem took like a year. It was more, it wasn't constant work, but I had written a poem talking about a certain lake, a metaphorical lake, um, and talking about my own name, my given name. Um, and that was not the best. And so in the middle of 2022, I think I just revisited that poem and its ideas. At that time, I think I definitely had a very subconscious process. I don't, I would, my writing process was and still is really about imitating poets I admire. So I believe I was just yeah, part of this book is really just like an exploration of craft. A number of the poems are just me trying to implement a certain idea of craft. But yeah, this poem, Self-Portrait as Empty Mirror, uh, let me think.
Well, I think,
Think
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
it's yeah, yeah, it is a bit of a prelude, I guess. I think of Um, Crush by Richard Seiken, which a lot of contemporary poets love. Um, I think it's a poem called Meanwhile that comes I think after You Are Jeff, which is I think a 28 section long poem, and right right after Meanwhile is Snow and Dirty Rain, which is I believe like 1,000 words, and it's just a short lyric that is sort of sandwiched in between these two very strange and dramatic um, poems. So while the poem didn't really originate from that need to have a sort of interlude between two dramatic poems, I believe it fit in at the end. So yeah, I want to highlight the line I try to write about America, but it always ends as a portrait of something burning, which is perhaps a bit on the nose. But as a non American poet, um, whose main inspirations are actually American contemporary poets, my main inspirations, I would just hear and write and read about the idea of America on and on and on. For example, The Palace by Kate Akbar. I believe a number of poems in Night Sky with Exit Wounds. Night Sky with Exit Wounds by Ocean Vuong. All of these mention America sort of as an image slash an idea. And as a person of faith, it's a bit blasphemous for me to say this, but it's almost like the way poets treat the idea of God. It's a very malleable and strange and looming, overwhelming idea that just permeates throughout the poetic canon. And so I found that, again, as a person whose origins have nothing to do with America, I find that America as an idea and sort of as an entity in current world events still looms and affects my life
Mhm.
and my writing practice.
Sure. So, being influenced by a lot of this American perspective, a lot of American poets, as you work through this craft exercise, these new poems, coming out on the other side of it and seeing it as a collection, do you feel that your perspective of America and its voice through its poets has evolved? The way that you see the writing of American poets or the American perspective, how has that changed in the production of this work?
Right. I think in the end, I didn't really think about America. It sort of went to the back burner. Because the rest of this poem is not just poem, the rest of the collection is actually, you know, incredibly personal to me. And so, if America as an idea and as an image influences the work, it's definitely on a more subconscious scale. I think even the writing of the title poem, Love Letters from a Burning Planet, there was a time when I was writing that poem when I almost wept as the line of the fourth section came to me. No, not fourth, actually, the sixth, which is a mother sings her only son to sleep, only their embrace withstands the burning. When I came up with that line, I suppose that's the feeling of when a poet knows they've struck gold, so to
Uh-huh.
speak.
That was an
Not
anchor.
to say
Yes.
that this,
Yeah.
yeah, not to say that this is the best line I've ever written, but you know, that's just when I felt my own words resonate with me. Um, so yeah, a lot of my writing practice really came. Uh, it's really at it's really at the sorry at the core of my writing practice. Really is that feeling of personal resonance. Especially in my recent practices, I feel that I'm engaging with a lot of elements of craft, but not really um, that element of personal resonance. You know, like I don't really love the recent poems I've written, which is why it's taking a little while for them to, you know, make their way into the world and also get to a place where I can say I'm proud of them. And so I think that's really what's special about this book, and I guess that's why it resonates, is because I made sure that at that point in time, even as a very young poet who's very early in his career, I made sure that my first body of work would be something that I put my utmost into.
Absolutely. And it definitely resonates. And I am interested in learning a bit more about how and I say this as a person of color in a place that is mostly white and cowboy in the state of Wyoming. I'm curious what your experience has been as a Filipino person living in in Saudi Arabia, and what has that been like, and
Right.
how has it informed
Yeah.
the way that you view yourself, and how has that informed your personal perspective? Because there's a lot of it here in some respects, but I'm just curious how you see
Mm.
yourself in this country as a Filipino person.
Right. Well, I think I have to touch on linguistics here, in that, at least with sort of semantics, but um, I was always, I've recently been curious about the American suffix, as in, let's say, Filipino American, Iranian American, Pakistani American. Um, and
And
yeah,
actually,
that embodied citizenship.
before you answer
Yeah.
that, let me sort of put the caveat. I think I was projecting there, so I apologize, but
No,
I
it's no
think I get what
problem.
you mean
Yeah.
now. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I really think about that suffix and what it does to affect a person's perspective. For instance, here in Saudi Arabia, immigrants currently won't ever get citizenship. So I've never really viewed myself as, say, Filipino Saudi, nor have I ever tried to be Saudi. Um, I live in a real sort of international hotspot, so there are a lot of immigrants in the city of Jeddah. But um, yeah, people don't really think about integrating here. So there's, I don't really want to say a melting pot, but definitely a whole lot of different identities that aren't really moving toward one sort of nebulous idea of, say, a countryman. I've always viewed myself as a Filipino, um, despite having grown up in a foreign country.
Mm.
I was raised in a Filipino family. My Filipino isn't great, but yeah, I still understand the language. I still connect with the culture. Um, and at the same time, living in Saudi Arabia has also given me, yeah, that same perspective of being sort of a Muslim in the Muslim country. Um, so there is obviously that aspect of public prayer. When I go to the mosque for my daily prayers and for the Friday sermons, um, I don't really see any people who look like me, but to me that doesn't really matter because um, again, pretty much everyone in the mosque in the house of worship is a Muslim, and that's sort of the basis.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's
for
it.
yeah, sorry. Can I expand a bit?
Oh, sure, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. To go into Muslim practice as well, there's a sort of homogeneity to it in that the main holy text of the Muslim faith is, of course, the Quran. But in our five daily prayers, we pray in Arabic. So we recite verses from the Quran in Arabic, and it's encouraged to memorize the Quran in the original Arabic. Um, you can, of course, ask things from God in your original language if you can't articulate it in Arabic. But the essential elements of a prayer are in Arabic. And um, yeah, I believe that's really what connects me to every other Muslim, in that even if we don't speak the same language, we still have the same holy text, and we definitely know, um, we have definitely internalized a number of verses from that sacred text. And I feel that's really the connection.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing that because it does bring it into full perspective, especially what you said at the beginning, this idea that home is not necessarily a geographical point, but rather the connection that one has in that kind of collective worship, in the way that you're able to be at home in the act of
Yeah,
worship. So I guess that, yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned this because I guess my perspective is definitely a very American one, in that I'm expecting that there's always going to be a bit of the cultural tension front and center, and that doesn't have to be the case. And I love how you clarified that, because it of course illustrates an American perspective that is so at odds with itself that it just has to assimilate and come together
right.
rather than just existing and accepting what it is. Um,
Yeah,
which is very powerful. But thank you so much for sharing that. Now I only got a couple more questions to be mindful of your time here, but I wanted to ask you, in terms of the faith aspect of your work, do you see it as,
right.
how do you view your writing itself, the methods and practices in relation to the way that you worship? Is there any kind of togetherness there or association, or is writing not a faith-based um, outlet for you?
Absolutely. Um, yeah, as the poet Sarah Ghazali says, I don't think I would be a poet if I wasn't a Muslim. Um, I began, of course, without really thinking about my own faith. But as I delve into poetry, as I delve into my own practice, I'm definitely thankful for having um, such an inexhaustible well, not really of just inspiration, but also of practice uh, in my own faith. Um, there's perhaps in a lot of religions, there's definitely that um, sense or idea of that doubt is just bad, And um, one of the main ways to sort of dispel that doubt is just, pray more, have more faith in God.
Hmm.
But um, yeah, I don't think you can get anything
Sure.
done with that. I don't think every person, of course, don't think every person of faith um, is one to say, just, quell your doubts. This question isn't really, if you have any questions, those aren't really, you know, applicable
Yeah.
to your faith. But yeah, but as a person who has experienced doubt before, those questions do definitely add up. And I feel that those are definitely, what drives a person away from faith. I will be candid and say that I wasn't really much of a practicing Muslim, even though I was a born Muslim until around 2 years ago,
Hmm.
because I was so saturated in the faith and in the practice that I never considered it really. That it was always just there, and
You felt like you were going through the
Islam is this, and
motions.
then there's the rest of the world.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Uh-huh. So if I
and
may ask, oh, sorry, I'll
yeah,
let you finish that thought.
yeah, okay. And so leading into writing practice and leading into the idea of dispelling doubt, I feel that a lot of my work, especially in Love Letters from a Burning Planet, there is a lot of doubt and confusion. A lot of the core ideas, especially in my recent work, is to explore doubt and anger, perhaps um, not necessarily at whether God is real or not, or if he has done this or that, or if he hates this or that, but rather uh, there's a lot of human confusion to sort of the plan of the divine. Because if we take into consideration the idea of a perfect divine entity who is perfectly omnipotent and benevolent, Islam also fully emphasizes that God is benevolent first and foremost. The two most repeated aspects of God, two of the most repeated names of God, are the most merciful and the most beneficent. This is said in every prayer, which is the first, or rather the second verse
Mm.
of the first chapter of the Quran, which is Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. I sorry, no, the first verse is Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which is in the name of God, the most merciful, most beneficent.
Mm.
And after that tangent, yeah, that idea of a genuinely merciful and benevolent God, uh, there is still that idea of, okay, there are mortals on earth, and we, even though we have been given direct um, consultation or conversation with God in the form of his holy texts, we still don't know God's plan. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis on, not judging anyone. A lot of Muslims say to not judge a sinner, to not judge a person, even a good person, because you don't know their whole intentions, and only God knows. And so the way that goes into my writing practice is there is a lot of doubt and confusion about God's plan, but I don't want to really approach God with a sort of hatred or resentment or anger, but more so perhaps confusion at, what all of these events and ordeals are going to mean.
Hmm. I appreciate that. And I know that I hope not to pry, but I feel like I'm curious if you'd be willing to share some moments that brought you back to your faith. I know that it is a very personal thing, and you've already been very generous with, sharing a lot of these intimate perspectives of your work. But I feel like, again, it could be an American thing, it could be a confusion thing that a lot of people over here in the West have. But I'm curious, what were those moments that turned you back to your faith, that made you feel that resolve rather than just going through the motions?
Yeah. Well, it came really when I came across the two verses from the 94th chapter of the Quran, Surah Ash-Shar, or Surah Al-Inshirah, which is translates to the relief. Verses 5 and 6 repeat, surely with hardship comes ease, surely with hardship comes ease. And I actually saw those verses in the context of a poem. I don't think I've actually ever talked about this, but the poem by Sarah Ghaza Ali, Daughter Triptych, really encapsulates a lot of the ideas that I try to make sense of. In that the poem itself really discusses a lot of doubt, a lot of horrible things. In the second section, it even mentions how before parents would bury their daughters, as because they were seen to be uh, you know not as good as sons, and so yeah, with in those three sections, Sargazali really displays a lot of doubt. But with the epigraph being surely with hardship comes ease, surely with hardship comes ease, from the Quran, which is believed to be the direct speech of God, I really resonated with that sort of placement. That even with all of our human trials and tribulations laid out, God still promises that after all your hardships in life, there will come ease, whether it's in this life or the next. And then that poem led me into reading and researching the chapter it's from and also the chapter before it. The two chapters, Surah Al-Inshirah 94 and Surah Ad-Duha 93. 93's title is Duha means morning or daybreak, and 94 means 94 Al-Inshirah is the relief. Those two are especially compassionate chapters of the Quran because in the context, so the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sort of piecemeal. And so he'd have a revelation one time, and then it would be a chapter or part of a longer chapter, and then it would go on and on for I believe for a number of years. I believe 23 years, but I could be wrong. But yeah, those two chapters were revealed after I believe 6 or 7 months of absolutely no revelation. The prophet was feeling a lot of doubt and feeling a lot of, what if God doesn't want me as a prophet anymore? And it again really resonates because if even the Prophet Muhammad, who is believed to be the final messenger of God and the most beloved to him, if even he had experienced doubts,
Mm-hmm.
then of course that would apply to every other Muslim. And so the content of these two chapters, they're both incredible, not very short, but yeah, they're only around 11 verses, 8 verses each.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they have incredibly compassionate and beautiful, verses
Yeah.
that God literally swears by his own creation in 93 and says, by the morning sunlight and the night when it falls still, as in, I swear by the morning sunlight and the night when it falls still, your Lord has not abandoned you, nor has he become hateful of you. And the next life is surely far better for you than this one. And yeah, and the beautiful, poetic, and compassionate, especially language of these chapters has really, really let me think about my own relationship to faith and made me realize, that if I believe in a beautiful and merciful and all-loving God, then surely, that love and mercy would be extended to me. Um, I've started writing another project, sort of based on my journey of faith, and yeah, it really has a number of keystone poems. One of which that really describes my idea of God as someone who's just always there. Just have to look back.
Yeah.
That I've
So that's the next one.
yeah,
That's the one on the horizon then.
yeah,
Uh,
hopefully,
yeah. So
yeah,
let I'm curious about this. I know that this could be a deeply American sensibility or part of the conversation that happens over here, especially with online discourse. But um, there's so much going on in the world, in particular in your neighboring countries, that
mm,
I feel like perhaps an American perspective is about commentary, about making statements, about trying to reconcile things using literature or art and things like that. And I'm curious how you feel your writing plays a part in the statement of current issues, or if you think
yeah,
that the work that you're putting out into the world is a more personal one, a more internal pursuit, rather than something that is representative of
right.
cultural and religious perspectives.
Yeah, thank you for setting that sort of line in the sand between the personal and the representation. Obviously, politics affects every single one of our lives, and even if we choose not to engage with it, that is still, in a way, being affected by current events. I personally don't think I'm anyone to make any definitive statements, nor am I really a person of such importance. And so a lot of how um, the Western name for it is the conflict in Palestine, but of course the genocide in Palestine and the regional conflicts, which are Israel attacking a number of its neighboring countries. I feel that that has really created another great sense of confusion and sort of disarray within me. A number of the poems written in the time when the genocide started to escalate was me wondering what poetry and literature's role in um, in all of this really is, and that I really wondered, is my own work really worth anything? Is like what what good is a love poem?
Mm,
So yeah, a lot of my recent poems have been sort of about that feeling. I
mhm,
even have a poem which is sort of spiritual successor to Love Letters, um, that ends with the line, "What now? What now?"
mm,
Um, and there's also the line, "How foolish I was to think the bullets would stop if I refused to name them. If I lived quietly, left the world untouched. How could language not grow tired like a sore fist?" And yeah, there's just a whole lot of turmoil within me, and I'm not sure what I will make of it, nor even what all of this conflict is going to do to the world. And so I don't think I'm necessarily at a point right now to say whether poetry has any place in all of this conflict. I believe it will always be a representation of current events, and and poetry will always stand against the status quo. But right now, I'm not 100% sure about poetry's um, place. Whether, any poet can say they're part of the resistance just because they write poems about it, about the genocide, about the war, about anything. I think we can see, especially in a lot of our peers, withdrawing from major prizes, withdrawing from major publications, resigning from their positions at publications who refuse to condemn the genocide in Palestine. I believe that action is what matters most. And, well, our work is just part of that resistance, and it's not a substitute for it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, MJ. And lastly, to end on a more uplifting note, I wanted to check in with you on the fact that as a younger poet who is experimenting, who is going through a phase of full exploration, which is a beautiful thing to see, especially as it yields wonderful work like the one that you've put out, Love Letters from a Burning Planet. I would like to know what you're specifically focusing on, and some works or artists who are inspiring you to I hate saying take it to the next level, but it's to continue
Yeah.
your development.
No, yeah. Yeah, some works, my inspirations. We have another hour.
That's part two.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think um, at the very core of my writing, and I think what you can see from Love Letters, I take a lot of inspiration from Ocean Vuong. I don't think I really take direct inspiration right now, but definitely his philosophy uh, is at the very core of my own writing philosophy, in that I believe writing is an act of compassion, an act of kindness, and that even if one is writing about turmoil, about doubt, about horrible things, even if one's writing contains anger, resentment, I don't believe the writing itself can be said to be angry or resentful or hurt, because I believe that if you choose to write about something, that is you looking at that subject, or that subjects, whatever inspires you. You look at it, you look at the turmoil, you look at all of its shattered pieces, and you say, this can be beautiful. This can be an object of beauty. And so that's really the kind of lens I want to look at language through, what I want to inform my work. And yeah, that's what is at the very core of my writing. And then to talk to sort of the honing aspect of that, all of the other inspirations, let me just rattle a couple names off, and then I'll go into them. Aga Shahid Ali really inspired the ghazal. His collection of ghazals, which is Call Me Ishmael Tonight, of course, has really, really inspired me. Sarah Ghazali, of course, has inspired me. I've been reading through her collection, Theophanies, and I'm finding it so incredibly expansive, yet still intimate. There is there's of course the element of worship, but there's also that element of intimacy as part of the human experience, not necessarily as just a love poem, so to speak. Not to bash the love poem. I wrote a book of them, but yeah, intimacy as an exploration. I also see that in Judas Goat by Gabrielle Bates. I also find her interview in the Writers Center, she mentioned Midst dot press, I believe that's what it's called. That's I believe what the website is. And She mentioned her editing process, which is incredibly cutthroat. And in my last few poems, I tried to emulate that. But sadly, that means I've gone through like 15 to 20 drafts of the same poem. Not really redrafts, but just anytime I want to make a significant edit, I'll copy paste the poem and put it on top as a way to keep all of my drafts and as a way to give myself permission to make wilder edits, because then I wouldn't, so then I wouldn't lose my previous drafts. So yeah, Gabrielle Bates, definitely. Gabrielle Bates, Sarah Lily, those two, like, for some reason, are very similar to me. Theophanes and Judas Goat almost feel like mirror images of each other, in that one has an undercurrent of faith, but is itself a beautiful exploration of intimacy and relationships, and then the other is a very deep exploration of faith with a bunch of persona poems. But still has this human relationship undercurrent to it that just informs and reinforces the work as a whole. Also, shout out to Richard Sykin for just getting me into poetry in the first place. Sort of like Ocean Falling, I don't really read much Sykin anymore, but I have to give him credit for the whole strangeness of Crush. It's incredibly weird, really, especially for a book so popular. But I like to think of it as dream logic. And so, yeah, there's that sort of wild element of play. And speaking of wildness, I have to mention Kaveh Akbar, who I think I accidentally stole a line from him in Love Letters. The opening line of Study of Daylight is, "The title is a lie." And that does come from a poem by Kaveh Akbar. And it was actually from a time when I just wanted to. That poem came from a time when I just wanted to free write and see what happened. And so, yeah, that whole feeling of, that whole idea of no punctuation, and giving myself permission to have incredibly strange and even weird imagery. His poem has a really long title. I think it's every drunk wants to die sober is how we beat the game. That incredibly weird and strange associative imagery is one I really love and I'm trying to emulate. But also shout out to my young poets. I'm part of a Discord server called Young Poets Workshops, or rather a Discord-based community of young poets aged like 13 to 22. And it's just absolutely incredible. You'd think that a whole bunch of young poets can't really get much done, but there are, not to play into America's thought of, accolades, but there's a whole lot of accolades in that server, and there's a whole lot of genuine discussion and love of poetry. But also, because there are a lot of young poets, there's a lot of varying experiences. Poets of varying experience. So you'll have someone who's potentially just getting into the literary world, and then you'll have one of America's brightest young minds who's probably going to an Ivy League school and all that. And yeah, it's just really great. It's just incredibly amazing. Shout out to the three moderators, Jen Aneski, Ivy Hua, Fiona Jin, a number of young poets that whose work I also want to highlight. Avery Yoder Wells, Heather Jin. I'm just looking through the Discord server.
There you go.
Yeah,
we need it. Yeah, we need
everyone.
I think what I'm going to do next time for all the guests is give me 10 independent writers or writers that you know who are amazing and need more love. Maybe that's what we're going to do. So thank you for that, because that was pretty great.
Yeah.
One last question, because it just came up, and in terms of ending on a good note,
Right.
I was curious of a small joy that you've had in your life, a little thing, a little moment. What's something that lifted you out of the mundane, that lifted your spirits, that, just an observation, a little joy in your day?
Little joy. It's incredibly stereotypical as a poet, but I just had 3 poems in Anti-Heroin Chic, which is a publication I really love. And I find that AHC really stands out because they focus. They really have a focus on healing and warmth and all that. I had the kindest acceptance letter, and that was just really amazing. And even more so, one of my poems in there, which is titled Lapse, is one of those crazy 20 draft poems that I was talking about earlier. And it's just really, it's just great to have my work pay off. But also, on another note, I finally received a copy of Theophanes by Sarah Ghazal-Ali, and she is absolutely my favorite poet. And she's just, incredibly warm, and been incredibly warm and kind to me. And I really cherish, all the work she's put out and all of the thoughts that, she's put into the world, and all kindness. She blurred my collection, which was absolutely heart-stopping. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on. But MJ, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk about your work today, for sharing your perspective, this point of view that we certainly need to hear more of on our neck of the woods here. But I also just want to congratulate you on a beautiful collection. Your debut is just absolutely marvelous, and I wish you the best, because it's been a wonderful time chatting with you. So I hope we get to chat down the road.
I hope so too. Thank you so much. It's just so incredible to be closely read.
It's a great joy to connect with somebody who's so far away, but yet is sharing such intimacy and such beauty with specificity that I just have to applaud you for that. So it's been my pleasure, MJ. But I'm going to let you enjoy your Sunday, which I believe it's still Sunday over there.
It is.
Okay,
yes.
good.
It's
good.
8 p.m. Sorry.
Wonderful. Well, I'll say have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we'll talk soon. I'll be in touch on the internet, okay?
All right.
You take care.
Take
Thanks
care.
again. Bye.
Bye.